Hello everyone. This is a continuation video on installing and using ComfyUI. We did the first video some time ago. So let's do a very quick recap on what the previous video showed and then have a few minutes to dig a little bit deeper into the usage and knowledge that will be helpful for you to become more familiar with the image generation ecosystem, best practices, and what we can do. I will leave all the relevant links for the websites and content that will be mentioned on this video in the description, as I do for every video. So definitely check the description, even if you're not following along and looking for the quick references on what the video may go over instead of, fully following the video. Perhaps you don't have any audio or anything else. So very quickly, what we did on the first video is we downloaded the ComfyUI installer. Installer is in quotes because it's not really a true installer, but just a compressed file that contains both ComfyUI and the Python environment needed to run it. So all the code of ComfyUI and all the code that is necessary to run the models is in Python. We unzip it into your favorite directory. Hopefully you have considerable disk space because each model can be quite large. I mean, they go, up to 48 gigabytes, some of them, although Flux is only like 24 gigabytes usually. We downloaded a checkpoint model. This is actually downloading either a stable diffusion model or a Flux model, whether it's been fine-tuned or not, it doesn't really matter. You can just use the base models. And then we queue a workflow. We just pressed queue on the ComfyUI, and then we would generate an image. So very quickly, downloading ComfyUI installer. If you remember, you just can search online for ComfyUI. You should get the GitHub link to the repo, and this is the fastest way to install it. You go a little bit lower, you see the direct link to download. You can see that it's a compressed version. We downloaded it, and then you have to uncompress it. To unzip it, uncompress it, you can download 7-zip, which is completely free, or WinRAR, even though it has the famous nagging window, especially obviously if you don't pay, so it will be free. But both applications will work perfectly fine to uncompress ComfyUI. After you have it already downloaded, you can just run it. If you remember, there were mainly two batch files that we can see on the repo itself right here. If we navigate, um, that will be one running with CPU and the other running with CUDA. So if we dig into the ComfyUI wiki, this is the next step that we wanted to take over on installing ComfyUI. We navigate. They do provide a beta version for a desktop installation that I have not yet tried, so feel free to try that if you want. Obviously, you have more flexibility and control if you actually manage to download the standalone version, which is that zip file, that compressed file that you can uncompress anywhere that you want. And then the next step to go over on this video will be to download a checkpoint model. I briefly touched on it on the first video, but the idea is if you go to Civit AI, for example, here I search for some models. Civer Realistic seems like a good model. I like the output that is generating, right, on the different things that you have. Uh, so also you can see the reviews are very positive. It tells you checkpoint trained, and it tells you the base model, in this case, a stable diffusion 1.5. It also is a very small model. So we can see obviously this using floating point 16. So it's 16 bits per point when it multiplies, the math inside of it that allows it to generate images. So evidently, the more bits you have, the more precise the computations are, and obviously the model can be stronger. However, pros and cons, and for most use cases we really don't care about that. So I am actually using right now the prune model FP16, which is only 2 gigabytes. So you can go ahead and just save it anywhere anywhere you want, but it should ultimately fall onto the checkpoints directory within ComfyUI. So wherever you unzipped ComfyUI, you will have a model subdirectory, and a checkpoints subdirectory inside of it. And right here is where you should put this downloaded model checkpoint. Um, that will be obviously super realistic, regardless of the name it has. So if we run ComfyUI after you downloaded the model or the checkpoint, and then you should be able to see the models when you click on the node to select you also have a search bar that allows you just to type and search for anything that you may have downloaded. If you just downloaded it and you don't see it, you can just refresh the site, and that should automatically show you any new checkpoints or models that you may have downloaded. So the next step that I wanted to show you on this video is that you can see when clicking this toggle on the top right, toggle button panel, this is exactly the console that you would see if you see the console where you run the batch file that started ComfyUI, and then with this other button you can just disable the menu bar. So the last thing that you may not have yet, if you have followed along, is this manager button, ComfyUI Manager. So that's the next recommended piece, right, on what we did. Installing ComfyUI Manager. ComfyUI Manager is a plugin. It is absolutely recommended and will allow you to have um, a lot of options to automatically manage different nodes. Nodes are these boxes that you see that abstract or represent step-by-step actions that will happen within the workflow, that do some either computation, they save an image, they preview an image, so they are just tasks occurring within the workflow. You can update, install, or uh, fetch dependencies that ComfyUI Manager may use. So this includes models as well. So you could use the model manager to download some of the models that are already available via this interface instead of having to go and download everything that you want, whether it is using Civit AI or Hugging Face. So Hugging Face, it's a company that started about 9 years ago, and it's like the GitHub for machine learning. So it's been around for a while, and what you can have here, of course, are all kinds of models or solutions around machine learning and AI. Of course, a lot of this is what allows it to just provide to us both, of course, LLMs like large language models, but also Flux models and everything that Civit AI may share and the community may share regarding. So for example, if we look for stable diffusion, we can see already that we have quite a few and we can see examples. So instead of us having to run this Python code that you can see as an example on every Hugging Face page and model that you will go, you can just run it via ComfyUI. So that's the great thing about ComfyUI, making it accessible and simple to run any workflows, and generating images very easy for anyone, right? So let's continue here. That was not like the fastest recap, but definitely a necessary one. Hopefully this was helpful. So we can continue by looking at ComfyUI Manager. This is something that you should install to have some of the extra functionality like updating automatically ComfyUI and other things. So you can see in the README also, of course, it is on GitHub. You can simply go to the ComfyUI custom nodes, right, directory. So if we navigate very quickly, we saw the checkpoints where we put the models. Now we can see custom nodes. And in custom nodes subdirectory for ComfyUI, we should we would install or put any node specific or plugins specific code. So again, this is a community driven project. You could create your own if you know your way around Python. We may have some videos around that. The idea is that for installing ComfyUI Manager, all you need to do is clone using this command line. So clone this repo of the ComfyUI-manager into ComfyUI Manager in that directory that we are showing, which will be, of course, already available wherever you unzipped or uncompressed ComfyUI. And then you would restart it. Restarting ComfyUI means, of course, closing down the command prompt or canceling or closing the console where you run CPU or run GPU or the run NVIDIA.batch file. And after you restart it, you should see the button here, Manager, as I showed you earlier. After that, of course, we can just queue any image generation. In this case, you see I'm just generating a simple image of a beautiful sunset on a beach. And remember that case sampler and all these parameters with the model, with the checkpoint, if all things being equal, obviously including the empty latent image, which is the actual size that the image will be generated with, they are all the same, you should be able to get exactly the same image on your machine. Now, if we navigate a little bit about on the documentation, we can see in the ComfyUI wiki, you can see a lot of everything that I just mentioned and how to do that. Some of the screenshots may be a little bit outdated, so keep that in mind, but nothing else that you can't follow along, especially after having this general understanding on what we're doing and the locations within ComfyUI and its path, logic, directories, and subdirectories. And then here as well, you can see what we mentioned about installing different models, right? How to install a checkpoint. You can go a little bit in more detail. The structure that you use within checkpoints, it gets automatically recognized. So you can search uh, via the UI, regardless of where you place within that path, within that tree of directories, your checkpoints or models. And then it goes into detail into other components that are not necessary just yet. So let's keep it short and concise, but there will be many add-ons or plugins and different information on how to install ControlNet embeddings, LoRa's, VA, hyper networks. So not really yet necessary. You can see you can and should start playing around, generating all the images you want, and get some exposure to all of this. You can, of course, when you download different workflows from different websites, or you get the original PNG. Remember, you can drag and drop the PNG straight on the page of the browser, and it will load the workflow that was used with all the parameters that were used to generate that image. That only works if the image is actually unmodified and untouched and is the original PNG, let's say, that was generated. So if I simply move this to a save image, you would save it into the output directory within ComfyUI. In my case, because I do preview a lot, I don't want every image that I generate to be saved. I just have the preview image. Now we'll go into details into how to make your own workflows in in the next video. But for now, hopefully this was another nice overview on how to get a little bit deeper as you go and move forward, download more checkpoints, get familiar with how everything works. You understand how you can find other models, whether from Hugging Face, Civit AI, how to manage nodes, ComfyUI Manager, how to install nodes. You have the wiki now, so if you want to go into specific things, and just go from there. See you on the next video.